then you avoid all of them.
Okay. I would not be comfortable playing like that, but I'm not Huey Jensen. I don't know if you've noticed that as we are underway here. I am not a Hall of Famer.
You're a goblin, not a giant.
That is also true. You see Jensen's going to start with a Hollow Fountain. He's got an island. He's going to pass the turn back. Pace of play here is going to be really interesting to watch because, again, one of the things that Jensen has played this deck last weekend in Dallas, got second place. He plays control decks all the time. He knows exactly what he's trying to accomplish at every stage of the game, and that is incredibly important in a matchup like this.
Yeah, pace of play is really important for Andrew Tenjum right now because he has to win 2 games.
Yep, such a big deal. As Azorius Charm is going to get cycled here by Jensen. Tenjum is going to respond. Oh, my goodness.
Notion Thief. All right.
Yes, this is happening. Notion Thief in standard. He'll take the card off Azorius Charm. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's one of those shrug. Yeah, I guess that happened moments.
I needed that to happen.
All right.
Okay.
That could be pretty relevant here.
I mean, this is actually a legitimate question here. Is how does blue-white go about getting that card off of the board?
If he kept in some Celestial Flares, that would be good. But if maybe Andrew will never attack with it.
I think it's actually reasonable for him never to attack with it. You see Notion Thief on the screen, already gotten a little bit of its advantage back. But, I mean, I think he can play this just as an enchantment.
Huey probably still has his verdicts.
Okay.
And we're going to see Gainsay on the Jace. Because his opponent's Esper, he has to expect that there'll be cards like Blood Barons on Tenjum's side of the table, so he probably doesn't cut the verdicts.
So this is interesting here, where Tenjum ends up, his Jace gets Gainsayed, plays a Temple, and he could have attacked with Notion into that Mutavault board, but he chose not to. So he could have traded a Mutavault for a Notion Thief there, but he elects not to, and now this Jace 5 has got to go on the mill plan. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Well, this isn't playing out at all how it's supposed to. There's way too much main phase stuff happening. I mean, it works, but this is,
So now
this feels like a mid-range matchup
now. I know. As Notion Thief is definitely on chase duty now, so that's going to go down to 1.
See, look, he's going to just resolve like Aetherling or something.
Yeah, this is Aetherling or Elspeth.
Elspeth.
Yeah, it is Elspeth.
Ah, so much tapping out. All right. Elspeth will make 3 tokens.
Yeah. And so we'll get the big die for you guys there at home so you can see the Jace is on 1, Elspeth is on 5.
The thing is that as long as Huey has answers to Elspeth in his hand, he doesn't actually have to go the whole distance with this Jace. He can just mill for 20, and then if the Jace dies, they can go back to doing the do-nothing plan, and Huey will be up 20 cards in deck, which is a huge place to be in this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And he's already milled some pretty good cards. Sin Collector, a Gainsay, some other things here, Hero's Downfall. So I'm interested to see exactly what Huey's going to do on this turn.
One question is, does the Esper deck have an Elixir in it?
Well, Tenjum's deck list. I don't see one in his main deck.
Okay.
And I do not see one in his sideboard.
So presumably Huey knows that. Or he knows he hasn't seen one yet. So
sure.
And Elixir in Esper is not usually a thing. So he already kind of, I guess, cards left in deck isn't as important then.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder if people have started to adopt that from watching Jensen get second place last weekend in Cunio's deck building if they want Elixir in their Esper deck. See, now Jensen's under some real pressure here from multiple ways, of course. Notion Thief not allowing him to draw as many cards as he would like to. There's an Elspeth out there that he actually has to worry about, and his Jace coming under fire next turn. Mutavault can only stop so much.
Yeah, well, he really needs a verdict right now, and I don't think he has one. Nonetheless, he went for the mill 10 plan instead of the draw card, which is pretty impressive.
Now, this is a very loud statement from Jensen that he has to actually replace his 5-mana Jace, which may have been one of his win conditions, with a 4-mana Jace and tick it up so that Elspeth doesn't do very much.
Yeah, well, remember, milling 20 is actually pretty reasonable.
It's not bad.
The worry here is that Tenjum will play land Aetherling.
Sure.
And I think that actually is going to happen. And Huey will be in a very difficult spot.
Well, Gala Shrine's going to come to play on tap, so Tenjum is going to go down to 18. And you mentioned land Aetherling being the play, and you see him setting up his lands accordingly so he can do just that.
And yet another tap out, and Aetherling hits.
So Aetherling's going to hit, tokens are going to come into play. Not going to play a huge role because Jace is out there stopping those, but Jace might have to go downstairs now.
Well, Huey and I were talking about just this. You know, remember, with his Elixir deck, he actually can beat Aetherling fairly he's well positioned to beat Aetherling, and what that ends up is he starts revelationing. He burns cards like Azorius Charm to fog the Aetherling, then he starts revelationing for progressively larger amounts, and eventually, thanks to the fact that he has Elixir of Immortality, he'll just revelation for 8 or 9 every turn, and he'll just start eating the Aetherling hits. And so he has to gain revelation control, and once he does, he actually can beat the Aetherling thanks to Elixir. That said, gaining control on this board requires a lot of cards, and I'm not sure that Huey's going to be able to do it in time.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. You saw him put a Divination on the bottom. He took the Elspeth to his hand. Divination not really going to have very much text right now because of Notion Thief. So Notion Thief is going to untap along with the rest of Tenjum's permanents. And he's pretty much in the driver's seat right now. He can take care of Jace. He doesn't have to worry about a Mutavault. And the things that go along with a blue-white player having 7 untapped mana. But right now, he's ahead on board position, and we were worried about, this game taking a while because Game 1 took a little while. But if things end up going accordingly over the next couple turns, plenty of time for Tenjum to win Game 3.
Yeah, they'll be able to play a somewhat leisurely Game 3. I'm not sure Huey's line here because he can't Revelation. He's got to get Notion Thief off the board. I really like how Tenjum's not swinging Notion Thief. I think that's a really heads-up play.
I'm not too surprised by that either. I mean, he's basically using it as an enchantment at this point.
Yes.
Nothing more than that. As he's got plenty of offensive weapons with those 6 tokens, more tokens coming from Elspeth, and, Aetherling out there with a bunch of mana. So Tenjum's going to start by pumping Aetherling 4 times. So that's going to be for 8, 9, 10, 11, and then the Jace is going to die. So Jensen's going to be at 9, Tenjum's going to be at 18, Elspeth is going to move up, so now he's threatening the ultimate with that as well. And I think if you're Andrew Tenjum, you are pretty content passing the turn back like this.
Yeah, Huey didn't draw the verdict, so I think I'm imagining he's going to pack it in here.
Yeah, I think I actually like this play too here by Huey because maybe he can get some extra information. He doesn't play a spell this turn. He has Elspeth in his hand that he's electing not to cast, so this is, I think, basically a concession at this point. But he's just not going to give away any information. You see Tenjum's going to attack with all his creatures. Jensen's going to pick up his permanents, and we're going to move on to a 3rd game. But I like the posturing there by the Hall of Famer of, hey, you're going to win. I'm going to make you kill me. Use a couple extra minutes on the clock, and we can move forward from there.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Huey, the knowledge he gained from the Notion Thief that game probably won't affect his sideboarding. He already boarded in his 2 Jace 5s and his 4 Gainsays, and nothing else in his board actually answers Notion Thief. So he's just going to be a little cold to that card.
I actually think that's really interesting. That's really, really good deck building by Tenjum because, again, everyone knows that blue-white is a big deck coming this tournament. I think if you and I sat down and we were just having a conversation yesterday about, hey, what do you think Huey's going to play this week? And it's like blue-white, man. Definitely blue-white. And you're looking for a trump to be able to blue-white from a control deck. If Notion Thief resolves and it doesn't attack, it's actually quite difficult to get off of the board, as you mentioned. Is it verdict or bust?
No, he has detention spheres as well as verdicts.
Okay.
Against Esper, detention spheres can be... They're sometimes live. It depends how many planeswalkers you see. You can obviously answer Jaces with them. You can answer Elspeths with them. Sometimes that's it. So it's possible that Huey boarded out some of his spheres, in which case they're probably coming back in. Otherwise, once it's resolved, those are the only outs he has to it. He's going to... Yeah, otherwise he has to counter it on the way down, which he does have Dissolves, Syncopates, and Gainsays for.
Okay. It's definitely something that he has to be cognizant of moving forward. For sure. That is definitely for sure. We look at Tenjum's sideboard again. We already know about the Notion Thief. He's got 2 copies of Blood Baron, a Doomblade, 4 copies of Gainsay. We saw 1 in his hand at the end of that game. 2 copies of Pithing Needle, a Shrivel, and then 3 copies of Sin Collector. So it's very apparent to me that he has come here to beat blue-white control. Or other Sphinx Revelation strategies.
Well, yeah, the 3 Sin Collector, 4 Gainsay, 1 Notion Thief. That's a package of 8 out of his sideboard, which are almost just designed for this matchup. And so that's going to be very strong.
And I can only imagine that in this matchup, because he knows that Jensen's deck does not have any creatures that he has to worry about verdict for. Like when you're playing the Esper Mirror, you have to kind of jockey for position of, do they leave Blood Barons in, do they board them out, things of that nature. He knows that, hey, he's got 4 Supreme Verdicts I can easily board out because there are no creatures on that size. I can board out my Warp Physique, which removal spell. I can conceivably board out my Dimir Charms or maybe my Detention Spheres, maybe my Hero's Downfalls. But I can definitely slice on removal and be okay.
Yeah, so remember, in this matchup, Tenjum's the aggro deck here.
That's funny to say.
Yeah, it's funny because they're both not aggressive at all. But all Huey needs to do is not lose. His deck wins by not losing, and Tenjum wins by actually casting things. So Tenjum presents some pretty unique threats. He has obviously the Notion Thief we saw. He will sometimes attempt to force through an Aetherling by using cards like Thoughtseize and Sin Collector to clear out counter magic. That's something else Huey has to be aware of. It's probable that Tenjum hasn't kept... Yeah, he's not playing any way to rebuy the Sin Collectors. But he also, for example, Huey's Planeswalkers aren't even very safe because of Hero's Downfall. He's really just on a very defensive plan.
See, both players are going to keep their 7. We're underway here. As Jensen just starts off with a couple lands. Tenjum with a Temple with that Watery Grave. Jensen going to play a Hallowed Fountain and kick it back.
Yeah, Jensen's ideal game here would be to literally only play lands. Even tapping out for a Jace 4 here is something that he'd probably prefer to not do.
But that is
It's
exactly what he's
still
going to do.
good.
Yeah, I mean, it's still Jace Architect of Thoughts. So
Yeah.
down to 2 it's going to go. There's a Gainsay, a Syncopate, and an Island.
My guess is he'll just take whatever pile has 2 cards. It's really just an answer everything deck.
Yeah. It's basically, to me, Jace in this matchup is just like a divination, really.
Yeah, if he wants to get extra greedy, what he can do is he can plus it and then minus it just to get even more value off the Jace.
Now, Aetherling, Jace, and Syncopate. What's important here, and I'm no control player like you are, but there are no lands in that pile. And obviously, what I see oftentimes I'm covering these matches, and from my limited experience, is first one to miss a land drop in this kind of matchup oftentimes loses.
Well, there's an interesting thing. Because this is a very early Jace, Huey could put the Aetherling by itself in the plan of shipping it to the bottom of Tenjum's deck. Because one of the routes that Tenjum has to victory is Thoughtseize, Sin Collector, Aetherling, boom. And that, I think that's what he's going to do, because he probably only puts Tenjum on having 1 Aetherling. And if that's the very bottom card of his deck, yeah, that's just a spot that Tenjum doesn't want to be in.
Mm-hmm. So Aetherling's going to go to Tenjum's hand. He's going to put the Syncopate and the Jace on the bottom and pass the turn back. So we've got dueling Jaces right now. I want to see how Jensen's going to use his. He's going to start by ticking it up and then going down the next turn, or at least try to. Plays his Warrior's Guildgate, representing some counter magic, and passes the turn back, as you do see a Dissolve and a Negate and a Syncopate in his hand right now. So now it's Tenjum's move.
Yeah, Tenjum is short on lands, and that could really be his undoing in a game like this. He drew a Detention Sphere. Remember that if he wants to D-Sphere the Jace, he has to burn his own Jace first, which he does.
Well, there's a Divination, a Temple of Silence, and a Plane. So we'll see how the Hall of Famer is going to chop these up.
Well, Tenjum's going to take the 2-card pile.
Almost assuredly. And the lands are going to go over.
Right. Would you like 2 lands or 2 random cards? And Tenjum would prefer to have 2 lands.
I want 2 lands, that's for sure. So I'm not sure about the card size in Tenjum's hand now.
I'm actually surprised about that split for Huey. I think Tenjum got the 2 cards he wanted.
There's a D-Sphere that's going to be targeting Jace. I'm very interested to see if Jensen's going to counter this. How much does he actually care about his Jace going away?
I think he cares enough to cast a spell here. There's nothing scary that Tenjum can resolve, and that the Jace represents more cards. And he got a counterspell out of Tenjum's hand there. So I think he was fine whether or not Tenjum countered back or not.
Jensen draws a Jace Memory Adept off of the top here. So this goes exquisitely for him because, we have this little battle over Jace Architect of Thought, which is basically a card advantage battle. But now the real card that matters is the 5-mana Jace. So now this is going to come in. Jensen's going to draw a card and mill Tenjum's Temple of Silence, play an island, pass the turn back.
I think he draws a card here because Huey doesn't expect this will live. There's just too much stuff in Tenjum's deck that can deal with it. Remember, he has Hero's Downfall in addition to Detention Spheres.
Well, Tenjum's got a Jace of his own, just happens to be the 2-mana one. So there's a D-Sphere, there's a Sin Collector, and now there's a Temple of Silence.
Yeah.
D-Sphere on its own there, a very quick split by Jensen. What we know, just like you guys do at home, is that Jensen's got plenty of counter magic in his hand for that Detention Sphere, so he's doing just fine.
Well, that play of Jace 4 basically told Huey that Tenjum didn't have the answer for his Jace. So that, Huey made the correct split there. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Huey fights over the Jace. Usually when you play blue-white control, you don't fight over any of your win conditions. You only fight over your opponent's win conditions. So as you see, he's still not even milling with the Jace. He's just getting extra cards off it.
He's able to mill a Sin Collector off of the top and draw a Revelation. Jensen, I believe, has 7 cards in his hand. He's got 7 untapped land, and he's more than comfortable past the turn back. As you see, we are underneath 15 minutes left in this third and final game. I think enough time to get this one over with, but again, you never know.
He is the perfect example of patience here. You even see a Divination in his hand, which he's just not casting because it's not card advantage, because he'd have to discard, so it's not even card advantage. He's going to wait till he will probably... When you get to this point, you'll see him use counter magic more aggressively than you normally expect because he can refill his hand to 7. By casting a negate or by casting a spell like this, now his Divination creates card advantage again.
So Dissolve is going to be the weapon he's going to use to try to fight a Tension Sphere. Tenjum's going to dissolve back, and will Jensen use a negate or a Gainsay here, or nothing at all, and let that Jace go away?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is exactly what Huey wants to be doing. He's forcing Tenjum to fight over Huey's win conditions, which really both players want to be fighting over Tenjum's win conditions.
So Dissolve is going to resolve on Dissolve, and D-Sphere is going to take down Jace. So this is interesting because he could battle over this if he wants to, as Jace Architect of Thought's going to move up, and he's opting not to.
The fight isn't about Huey's win conditions, because remember, he doesn't actually have win conditions. You know, so the fight is he doesn't want to burn his counterspell because Tenjum might have one now.
Ah, I see. A Glare of Heresy is going to take care of the Tension Sphere. Huey's going to get his Jace back, and he says, let me count how many cards
Now
you've got
we
over
might
there.
see him start milling.
Yeah.
Even so, I don't know if he does. He may just draw more cards. That may just be the correct way to play it. Just draw cards and draw cards and draw cards.
He says,
All right, he's going to go for 10.
how about you lose 10 cards? So you see a Godless Shrine, a couple lands, a Sin Collector, a Thoughtseize, Verdict, Revelation,
And that
Elspeth, a
pesky
Spear.
Notion Thief.
Yeah, and that's got to go too. So a good mill there from Jensen. And now this is his win condition. Obviously, I agree with you that his deck doesn't really have win conditions. You know, it's just, again, basically putting the opponent in a sleeper hold. They'll give in eventually, as you see a Dissolve, a Gainsay, and a Hallowed Fountain revealed from Jace.
You know, that's always my joke when, you know, people, when they first will watch you play this deck, you'll have a Jace 5 in play, and your opponent will cast a Detention Sphere, and your hand will be like 2 Dissolves and a Negate, and you just be like, Detention Sphere resolves.
Yep.
You'll be like, what's wrong with you? Just be like, what? I don't need him. I have this, you know, I have a Divination in my hand.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter very much to me. It's now we're going to see a fight over Detention Sphere here, as there's a Gainsay, Detention Sphere, there's a Gainsay back on Gainsay, so a little counter war there. We don't see that a ton now in Modern Magic like we used to in the old days. Temple of Deceit going to come into play. That's going to put a card on the bottom because it's going to get milled anyway in one way or the other. And now going to pass the turn back to Jensen. Will Tenjum.
What Jensen can do is because he has Jace 5 going and a Divination in his hand, he has so much overwhelming card advantage that he can just afford to fight these counter wars because he can refuel faster.
There's a mill of 10 more cards. And Jensen just plays a land and passes the turn.
So he didn't. I believe he has it. And maybe he doesn't. No, he does have a Divination. That's something where I'd have to hear from him. He didn't make the Divination play, which to me is really interesting.
Well, he does have a Sphinx's Revelation in his hand, so he could be setting up for that. And I think he's got a pretty good idea, as there's a Thoughtseize there from Tenjum to start off the turn. That I think his thought process here is like, I mean, I don't think you have very much counter magic left in your hand, so I can just rev up pretty safely right now.
Yeah, but he opts not to rev there in response to the Thoughtseize.
Got a counterspell. Why do anything? I got a counterspell.
Well, sometimes you just want to counter the Thoughtseize because you think the Thoughtseize is going. If you think the Thoughteize is going to take your counter, but in this play it's correct to not do that because now he has mana for the rev.
So Tenjum's going to play a Watery Grave untapped. He's got an Aetherling in his hand. He's also got 2 copies of Sphinx Revelation, but those aren't so good right now. So he's going to play 6. He's going to tap 6 mana. Play Aetherling.
And here's where we see the blue deck not care about Aetherling. This is gonna, like, true story. Huey is not concerned about this Aetherling too much. Remember, if you have Revelation control, you can defeat an Aetherling.
And he can very simply find an Azorius Charm here to fog the Aetherling. And by fog the Aetherling, I mean mill the opponent 10 more cards. So now here's a big rev for 5.
The only card he'd fear here would be Dispel. If there's a 2-mana counter, it's fine because he can kill the he can then sear the Aetherling.
3, 4, 5 cards drawn. 5 more life, which isn't really a big deal at this point, but he is at 25. He'll draw a card. So we've seen 6 fresh ones, but it looks like a lot of lands among those, oddly enough. And that Divination that you've been hearkening to cast, he just did pull forward in his hand, so it looks like he's going to start there.
So you always like it, that right after drawing 5 cards on end step, your first play is, well, I better Divination.
So give me 2 more, says Jensen. So hit 1, hit 2, couple counter spells. Not sure any of those are answered for Aetherling, though. He's got a Mutavault in his hand, which will force the unblockable part of Aetherling, but I'm not entirely sure he has an answer.
So what he's looking for, because he doesn't have, he's a Azorius Charm still answer, though, to be fair, he probably boarded out most of those.
We did see him cycle 1 in game 2, so as you mentioned, most of them are probably gone. He might have 1 or 2 left.
Yeah, there's probably some left. So he doesn't have too many ways to fog the Aetherling. What he has to do is just keep resolving Revelations and Elixirs.
Jensen going to mill 10 here. Elspeth, Thoughtseize, Gainsay, Syncopate, Jace are the spells, couple of lands as well. He's going to start by playing a Mutavault. Now,
I believe Andrew's on a single-digit number of cards in his
I
deck.
think so as well. As Jensen's going to cast Attention Sphere, he's going to target Jace. Says, I don't want you to get any deeper into your deck. Pass the turn back.
Yeah, the first thing that Tenjum's going to have to do here is kill Jensen's Jace.
He's got to try, that's for sure. And Tenjum immediately. All right, this way. To your Jace. Huey says, all right, it's gone.
So Tenjum, I think Tenjum almost fire. Well, he can't really fire off a Revelation. Tenjum
No.
has to assume none of his spells are resolving.
Yeah. I think at this point he's literally just Aetherling or bust.
Sick draw from Huey.
Yeah.
Sick draw. Elixir of Immortality. He will soon become immortal.
That is the real win condition. And the sweet thing about this deck in his hand, too, is that he's got 2 counter spells in his hand, so he can protect it. He can fight over it, too.
So remember, his game plan is to every turn make a land drop, and then Revelation, and then crack the Elixir. And then, this is very flavorfully an Elixir of Immortality here. His plan is to become very immortal.
Sin Collector is what's going to try to start things, but Dissolve is going to take care of that. Scry, put that on the bottom, and he's going to shuffle that Dissolve back in anyway, so he might as well counter that as here comes Aetherling.
It makes your Elixir even better.
What do we have here? All right. Little activation. Looks like he was going to activate Mutavault.
Yes, he activated Mutavault. He's just burning. He's burning through Andrew's mana.
Yeah. So Aetherling looks like it's going to come across here for 8 for the full point swing. Going to put Jensen down to 17.
And Tenjum playing with no fear of a Azorius Charm. Azorius Charm would actually really, tapping down to 1 blue makes you vulnerable to Azorius Charm D-Sphere.
Well, guess what Huey just drew? The old Azorius Charm.
Oh,
He's going to take a look to see how many cards you got over there. Looks like single digits there. He's just going to pass the turn back here because, as you mentioned, he doesn't really have to do anything. He can just sit pretty. He's immortal.
All right, here comes Aetherling. And activates Mutavault. Huey once again burning through Tenjum's mana.
Tenjum going to activate this 4 more times as we're under 7 minutes on the clock.
And just some little things. Note that Andrew is saving all his blue mana. He used both his plains and black-white lands to pump the Aetherling.
Azorius Charm going to act as a fog. Again, you see in Tenjum's hand, he's got multiple copies of Revelation. That is a Temple of Silence. He wants to take a look at the top card of his deck, immediately puts it on the bottom. He's going to let Aetherling come back in and play and pass the turn back.
All right. And so Huey just not even using the Elixir yet because what he'd prefer to do is burn out all of the Azorius Charms to like spells before he reshuffles. Also, that gives him a chance to get more lands down to better improve his reshuffle when he finally does crack it.
Says activate Mutavault to try to block again. Tenjum says unblockable. We've played this song and dance a couple turns now. Try to get you for 8. Jensen says, all right, you got me for 8. I'm at 9. Virtual 14 right now, though, because of Elixir.
So 2 hits.
Jensen's going to take a draw step. Divination, not a bad place to start.
Yeah, and eventually Jensen's going to have to make a move here. I don't think he has the Revelation yet.
So, hit 1, hit 2. Looks like a couple of lands there. He does play 27, so getting flooded is a very real possibility for this kind of deck.
Yeah, its anti-flooding mechanism is divination, because more lands equals more cards equals more lands equals more cards. So hopefully as he gets lands, he'll just get more cards, so it won't matter. That's the idea. He's going to a fairly low life total now, though. He's down to 1, I believe.
Yeah, he is at a virtual 1 life right now, so that Elixir is something I think he may have to use.
Well, at a literal 1 life, right?
Yeah, he is at a literal 1 and virtual 6, excuse me.
Yeah, he probably wants to shuffle Elixir on end step here so that he has an out of redrawing the Elixir.
Okay,
it gives him an extra card to draw. It might be that Huey's out of... He may not be as immortal as advertised.
Yeah.
His extra card draw has not found another Revelation yet.
And he hasn't found an Azorius Charm. Now you see him doing the math about, okay, how did I get myself into this situation? Everything was going great.
He has to decide whether or not he improves his odds of a top deck or hurts his odds of a top deck by cracking Elixir.
And now he's going to count his library.
So this is an actual math calculation.
These are the things I would come to you for.
Well,
you're the math teacher.
It's just a fraction. Yes.
Yeah,
but
you say that like it's easy.
I think that most Magic players know how to do this math, and most of them, when I would tell you like what you have to do, just look at it and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I mean, what you have to do is you have to count your number of outs, count your number of cards in graveyard, count your number of cards in deck, then like divide. You know, but that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
for
all
one
I do
decision.
is attack for 2, man. I don't really do any.
Like,
2 plus 2 is 4, and then I attack for more, and then I get them to 0 eventually. That's only what I do. Jensen's gonna draw a card.
Besides a blind card, it's Pithing Needle. That's
actually
good here.
pretty good.
That's all right. That was one of the cards left in the deck.
That's actually
well
really
calculated, good. Sir. Well calculated.
Oh my goodness.
And there is a dissolve in Tenjum's hand, and I mean it's snap getting used.
Yeah, it's getting used, and
it's not resolved.
Yeah, it's not going to resolve. Needle is great here. That was an insane top deck from Jensen.
Now Jensen has to make sure he wins. Okay, now he has to look at the clock and be sure he wins. If I'm Jensen, my mindset switched here. Now I'm looking at the clock, and I would be bolting through all my
Yeah,
moves.
I gotta get rolling here. 'Cause
Yeah.
the draw is awful for me.
Well, because the only way you can force the win is what? There's that many cards.
Oh
and-
yeah, he's only got 2 cards left in his deck.
Oh,
so
it's
he's
only
actually
2?
okay. Yeah, I think he's only got 2. So
Oh,
never
well,
mind.
you can't really
I-
go play 5 turns with only 2 cards in your deck.
Yeah, for some reason
So,
I was
alright.
thinking that he needed to deal 14, but there are only two or 3 cards left in the library.
Oh, you
here.
can't deal 14 in this matchup. There's not, even if you ultimate Jace, which is your normal win con, there's not a card to steal out of Tenjum's deck that you can use. You can't steal his Aetherling because you can't blink it.
So what Tenjum's going to do here is he's going to blink out Aetherling, and then the Syncopate is going to resolve and then dissolve. So now Aetherling's going to come back and play a smart play so that Verdict doesn't actually take care of Aetherling. He draws a card. It's an island. I believe Tenjum has 1 card left in his
Yeah,
deck.
well, he does have his Mutavaults to chump with.
Yeah, and they are both at the forefront. So you see he's going to say activate 1, block. My thing
Dead.
is dead. And Tenjum has to pass the turn back
Tenjum
here.
knows he's in trouble.
I'm not sure Tenjum has an out here, but we'll see. As Jensen draws
Well,
a card, it's a D-Sphere. That
sure.
can take care of Aetherling too.
Probably has to use that.
Mhm.
D-Sphere will take care of Aetherling.
And that
And
is
that'll be
going
it.
to do it. So William Jensen, the Hall of Famer, with a deep sigh of relief, wins this match 2-1. Blue-white control the deck. He just got the finals at Grand Prix Detroit. Grand Prix Dallas. He's off to his winning ways again. 2 buys and 1 win, so 3-0.
Yeah.